It's like when a kid's young and they're starting to learn how to ride a bike. When you're getting on the bike, it's like you have the training wheels and then you have to take those off and then your parent has to leave and you have to become more independent. And I think sometimes we make that to be the same as our relationship with Jesus. When we become a Christian, I think we start at a good place. It's like I'm very dependent on God, but in our walk with God, we start to feel like, okay, he expects me to become more independent now with him. And I think that's why a lot of the trust goes away. It's like, okay, I need to take more care of this. Like I need to be more righteous. I need to perform better. He's expecting me to take those training wheels off now, right? But he wants us to become more dependent on him, not less,
Welcome back to the podcast. We're so glad that you're joining us today. And we are going to be talking about a topic that I don't think gets talked about a whole lot in podcasts, certainly not Christian ones. And that is kind of the idea of embracing your inner child and living your life with joy. And I think that this is just such a super important topic to go down because I feel like I talk to people a lot and there's like this concept that you have to be an adult, right? You can't be a child anymore and you have to be serious all the time. And while yes, we need to be adults and we need to be responsible, there's still an element of our inner child and that childlikeness that is actually a lot more important than we realize. And I think starting off here, it's important to point out that there's a difference between being childish and being childlike.
Yes.
And so I just want to be clear that we're not advocating you just mooching off other people, quitting your job, doing nothing with your life, drinking juice boxes and
reverting.
Not caring about other people, not growing your skills. Like that's not what we're talking about. It's important to be an adult and be a responsible adult, contribute to society, right? But there's that childlikeness that I think we want to talk about. And it just, it seems like it's something that almost makes people uncomfortable. Like, oh, I don't want to go there.
Yeah, for sure. And so it's like, where does this go? And like, why do we feel like when we get older, that part of us kind of fizzled out and like, we're not allowed to have that anymore? And a couple of things that came to mind was adults get into survival mode, I think, a lot of the time. Like people say, I'm adulting now, and like they talk about it kind of with a negative connotation. And it's like this idea that when we get to adulthood, we have to do all these things that aren't joyful anymore. It's like, okay, they can be joyful, but we can think about them as a negative thing. And it's like, okay, well, I just have to go to work now and I have to pay my bills and I have to clean my house. And it's like, when you're just living life to do those things and to accomplish and to like check off boxes, like you can get so worn down, And so I feel like that's one reason why that childish part of us might fizzle out.
The survival mentality is something I can really relate to. I feel like there was a time not too long ago where Jeff and I kind of got into that mode because there was a lot of projects we were working on, both for work and personal. And it was kind of like one of those times, probably like a week or two or something, where I was like, I just have to get through this, right? I just have to get through it. I just have to get this done and then I'll be fine. Yeah. But then what happens with that mentality is you get through what you thought you needed to get through and there's something else there waiting for you. And then you're like, okay, well, once I get through this, then I will be able to kind of breathe more and everything. And I think really at the end of the day, not that things don't come up that need our immediate attention, but it's a mentality. Like you said, the survival mentality. And if we're not careful, it will take over our lives and become the way in which we embrace life, not for a season, but actually for our lives. And I mean, it can affect your health. It can affect your mental capacity. It'll definitely affect how pleasant you are to be around. And it's just one of those lies of the enemy, I think, in our culture today, is to get us so into survival mode. Because, I mean, when you think about it, it's pretty crazy. Like, people used to actually have to survive, right? Like, when you came out west in a covered wagon, I mean, it's like crazy. I think my my great grandma came out as a child in a covered wagon.
Wow.
It's like, yeah, like it wasn't that long ago.
Yeah.
And, you know, think about I've always thought like, man, it'd be great to see like movies about like people who came out and like what kind of crazy things they had to go through, right? I mean, they, especially the first ones, they did not know what they were getting into. I think I was driving to a wedding for my cousin over in, or no, we were driving somewhere else. I forget. Anyway, I was headed to Grand Junction, which for us, you have to drive through the Rocky Mountains here in Colorado, and then you get to the other side of the mountains, and then you're in Grand Junction. And when you get there, you're kind of getting close to Utah. And what happens is you come out of the mountains and it's flat, but then there's these giant plateaus that just stick out of the ground. And to me, they look like so alien and different. I was like, what is this place? And I was telling Jeff, I'm like, imagine coming out here on a wagon and this is what you see. You're like, what's going to happen next? Like there's animals, there's all kinds of things like going on. And I'm like, what an adventure. That was survival. Okay.
That was literal survival. It makes me think about that question I've been seeing on the internet. And it's like people asking girls, would you rather run into a man or a bear in the wild? And a lot of girls are saying a bear.
Oh, bear.
But it's like, yeah, see, bear.
Oh,
for
I would
sure.
say bear.
For sure. And I feel like guys are like, what? It's like, no, I'd much rather run into a wild.
Are you kidding me right now? Like,
oh, yeah.
Of course, a bear.
Yeah.
A bear is dangerous. Don't get me wrong, but it's somewhat predictable. It's if I'm careful, I could get away.
Yeah.
But if it's threatened, it'll attack me, right?
Yeah.
A man is like,
you don't know what they're going to do.
You
don't know what they're going to do.
A lot of things could happen in that scenario. So
exactly.
Bear all the way.
Yeah.
Bear.
Let us know if you agree. I'm pretty sure you will.
Felicia now has her nifty bear mace, right? Or did you not get it?
Oh, I never bought it. Are you talking about the Yellowstone? Yellowstone? When you go to Yellowstone, they like sell bear mace for so much money, and we never bought it. But then we heard that you never really see bears, and then we also heard from that other guy that you do kind of. So I don't know what it's about.
So
maybe
Felicia would rather see a man. Yeah, she doesn't have a bear mace, but yes, the point in that weird story was that. That's survival, right?
Exactly.
It's crazy that in a world where we have so much comfort and, you know, gadgets and things to help us in our day, that we could actually be living so stressed and so full of anxiety, and to the point where we're in survival mode when we live in a world full of luxuries, really. And I know not everyone's life is the same, but compared to, you know, years past, we really live in a very wonderful world full of all kinds of amenities and things that people only dreamed about. And it's the enemy. And it shows you that it really is a mentality. It's not always about your circumstances. For some people it is, but for a lot of us, especially those who are able to listen to something like a podcast, a lot of it is in our mind, and it'll never be enough. It's never satisfied. You'll get through one thing and there'll be something else there. So fighting that mentality is big.
Yeah, absolutely. So another way I feel like the enemy can really like steal our joy, or that inner child like in us, is like feeling the need as an adult to put on a performance. And, you know, when you're a kid, I feel like you kind of just say what you want when you want, and you dance and you laugh, and it's like you're not so conscious of how you're being perceived to other people. And I feel like that makes you just have a little bit more freedom in your life of like, you know, being able to laugh and just like play and stuff like that. And it's going to look different as an adult, you know, like we're not wanting to act like children, like we said in the
beginning. Jeff would not be too happy with me if I ran around and just sung all the time.
But just like this thought of, we kind of start to try to just mold ourselves as we get older, and like the stereotypes that we see, or the performance that we see. It's like, oh, people don't do this anymore. Okay, I'm going to mold myself. Now this is kind of unacceptable. I'm going to mold myself. And then you kind of just become, it's almost like in my head, it's like you start off really colorful, and then it's like you get older and older, and it's just, you start to become black and white. Like you're just kind of molding yourself into what you think you should be. And I think that can really steal our joy and the ability to express ourselves. And that kind of just takes away that childlike part of us, I think. Yeah,
absolutely. Not feeling like you can be yourself is a really lonely feeling, even if no one else is the same. it's the way God made you. And so just
Exactly.
embracing that, I think, is really good.
And then another thing that kind of ties into that is when you get older, I feel like there's things that kind of start to feel like off limits to adults. And one of the things that come to mind is actually Disney, which we talk about a good bit on this podcast. I think I talked about it the last episode. But,
Yes.
you know, I feel a lot of people are like, oh, okay, we don't have kids, you know, we're not going to go to Disney anymore, or we're not going to go to Disney until we have kids, right? And so I think there's certain things that really bring people joy and there's no harm in them, but it starts to become unacceptable to people. And so that can, like, if those things bring me joy, like Disney brings me so much joy. It gives me like creative inspiration, you know, and there's a lot of benefit to it. So I feel like if I kind of just start to cut all those things out of my life that bring me joy, stuff could get very dull.
Yeah, another thing that I feel like seems to be off limits is like dressing up.
Yeah.
And like, I love dressing up for things. And then I find out people are like, what? You do that? I'm like, you don't? Like, what? Like, I love it. And I love that I have a husband that loves to do that too. Who you marry is going to impact a lot of these things for you.
That's true.
But something that Jeff and I love to do is have themed parties for people. So like a lot of times for our birthdays, it's a birthday has to have a theme, right? It's kind of like Kelly in the office. Like they give her cake and she's like, what's the theme? There's always a theme, right? Like, what's the theme? And so there has to be
Sleep
a
or TV.
Sleep or TV. That is a theme. And, but yeah, like we've done all kinds of parties. We do a lot of like murder mystery parties, which by the way are really, really fun. And they always have a good theme. And so you dress up and you do that. And then, you know, we'll have like Oktoberfest parties and Cinco de Mayo parties where it's like a fiesta and at Christmas parties, you throw good Christmas parties where we actually dress up in some kind of Christmas theme.
Any reason to dress up, honestly.
Any reason to dress up. Those have been really, really fun.
Yeah.
But I've noticed that like we'll throw these parties sometimes and I'll have friends come up to me and go, you guys are the only friends that we know that do this. None of our other friends do this. We love it so much. And I'm like, wow, you know, like I see some of our friends come and do this and it just, they awaken, right? Like they really have so much fun. And I feel like they're given permission to kind of enjoy themselves and be childlike once again. And that's so much of what people need. They just need that permission to be themselves, to be joyful, to enjoy the things that deep down they really enjoy. And sometimes we can give people that permission by kind of stepping out and doing it first.
Yeah, for sure. I've had people who don't live here who say the same thing. They're like, man, I wish my group of friends like did more stuff like that because it's really not very common. And I think it kind of just boils down to finding reasons to celebrate in life, right? Like when you get older, there are still reasons to celebrate.
Absolutely.
So,
There are so many like parties I want to throw. Like there's too many like things to celebrate throughout the year that I can't throw enough parties for.
There was just Cinco de Mayo, and I'm so sad I didn't do anything for Cinco de Mayo, but we usually do. We've done a lot of good stuff for that.
Yeah. So I think it's also important to think about some of the areas of our life that the enemy can try and steal our joy, because sometimes we can compartmentalize our lives, right? So we're like, oh, my joy's over here, and then my marriage is over here, and then my kids are over here, and my job's over here. And it's like, no, that's supposed to be sprinkled all over the place, right? And so some of the areas that I think it can be easy for us to lose our joy and maybe we don't realize it's happening is one big one, I think, is marriage. And we did just do a marriage episode a couple weeks ago, so we'll link to that below if that's something that interests you. But that's an area that I think the enemy absolutely tries to steal joy from because he hates marriage, right? Like he absolutely hates it. It's a picture of God's love for his people, and he can't stand that. And so it's really important that when you do get married and as the years go by, it's important to remember that there is an enemy and he does not like your marriage, right? And things that used to be cute that your spouse does, now they're annoying. And right, like,
exactly.
And now it starts to feel like work and you feel like maybe it's one-sided. And so it's just so important to keep that joy in your marriage and to realize that's an area that the enemy could be trying to come against.
Absolutely. Yeah, you think about like with just not wanting, but like not taking the time to go out on dates and stuff like that. And dates don't have to look like go out and eat dinner together at a restaurant, but just like going out and still allowing yourself to have fun with that person. You know, it's not all about let's get the chores done and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Another area that I think it's easy to lose your joy in that starts off as a good thing, right? All these things start off as something good and a blessing from God, and that is a new home. And a new home can be so exciting and so much fun, especially if it's like an upgrade and it's bigger. You're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Look at how good God is. And we get so excited and we decorate and we rearrange furniture. We get new furniture. Yeah. And then as the years go by, or months, and we realize, oh, I have to clean this thing, right? And it's like the bigger the house, the more the cleaning. And, you know, it can quickly become this thing that now we have to take care of. And now it's taking all of our time, and it's a burden, and it's expensive, and it's all these things. And so that can quickly turn into something negative if we're not careful. A new job could be something that starts off as like this amazing new thing. And then all of a sudden we start realizing that our boss isn't as perfect as we thought they were, and our coworkers aren't as great, and maybe we're not given the opportunities that we thought we should have been given at the beginning. And so that's something that can kind of go. And then another thing I thought of was something as simple as a vacation. And I think, like, speaking of Disney, we go to Disney a lot as well, and I'll see a lot of families, and a lot of times I see a lot of stressed out people, especially parents. And honestly, I can't imagine going with kids. It's something I haven't experienced yet in my life, and so I'm sure it's another level. But, you know, a lot of times it's like, how long did you spend saving for this trip? How much money are you spending on it? And so many people look miserable. And, you know, there are lots of tips that we have that can help your Disney trip. But a lot of it is just the thing about this is the enemy will just take anything that's good, that's from God, that's meant to give you rest, enjoyment, or joy, and he wants to turn it into something burdensome and bad, and something that sucks the joy out of you. And so it's just really important to kind of be on guard in these different areas of our life. Something that's meant to be good could easily be turned into something bad if we allow the enemy to kind of start distorting it in our mind and getting us to focus on, oh no, this is actually a burden and not a blessing.
Yeah, especially with work. I mean, this is true in all the areas you mentioned and so many more, but it's like with work, on my Instagram, I've seen a lot of pages recently, and honestly, they're pretty funny some of the time, but it's like just pages that are complaining about work, like their bosses and stuff like that. And it makes me realize that everyone's kind of going through the same thing. And I think a lot of times we can start to feel like, oh, I'm not being treated right, or this person above me is like so difficult to work with. And then you see that there's so many people who are going through the same thing. And it seems like, why is that the case, right? And I think it's because exactly what you said. It's because the enemy comes against us all in the same way with these areas. Like, we all feel like we're being treated the wrong way, or that we're not getting what we deserve in a certain area. And like, I've noticed times in my life where I just feel like I'm complaining so much, and I'm like, is this really justified? Like, there's a lot for me to be thankful for, but I feel like I just like lean towards complaining. Like, it seems like an easier thing to do. And it's like, why do you think it's like so much easier sometimes to see the negative in situations or get into that mindset?
Yeah, that's a really good question. One that I think we all probably struggle with. Yeah. I know I do. But yeah, I think a lot of it just has to do with, like, I mean, one, it's a very fleshy thing. And I think a lot of us are more used to living out of our like souls and stuff more than our spirit. And so it's just kind of the natural way that we think and feel. But also, you know, I think when you complain, I don't know about you, but for me, when I do complain, unfortunately, I start to feel really justified in how I feel. Like when I complain, my reasons for complaining become stronger and stronger. And then it's like I justify myself and how I feel, where it becomes actually not only do I feel this way? But I should feel this way, right? Like,
It's
I'm
so
the
true.
victim.
Yeah.
And it's almost like everyone's looking for a reason to be the victim, because it takes away responsibility in a sense to break free of that and to actually step away from those emotions. You know, you deserve it because you're the victim.
Yeah.
And while, a lot of bad stuff happens and a lot of unfair things happen, and a lot of times we are put in difficult situations, but you can either be a victim or a victor. You can't be both. And the enemy wants you to choose being a victim. And so complaining will only fuel that fire. Whereas choosing to rely on Jesus and be like, okay, well, I'm not being treated right, but neither was Jesus, and he's going to help me, and he sees what I'm going through.
Yeah.
That's going to help you overcome everything. But the enemy doesn't want that. So
yeah, when we get into that mindset of like, well, I should feel angry, I should feel worried because of what's happening to me, you know, like, I feel like when that happens, it does make us feel like a victim. And when we're a victim, it's kind of just coming at us, right? We're not having to choose it, you know, so it keeps us from really taking any action against it. Yeah. So when we think about living from more of like that child mindset, you know, it made me think about when I was a kid, how when I would be doing stuff that was fun, like when I would be, I don't know, playing with my friends or whatever, I would be in the moment so much, right? Like I was not focused on the past. I wasn't focused on the future. I was really just allowing myself to be in the moment. And I think that's one way still as adults that we can take that back, right? We can take that joy back, is allowing ourselves to try to live more in the moment. And I think that's something that happens when we're adults. We've been through experiences, like maybe we've been through negative experiences, of course. And so we start to feel like, you know, either thinking about how better the past was or the shame maybe we had in the past, or we've like tried to take control and been like, okay, how am I going to fix the future? Like, what can I avoid? You know, it's like all about not being in the moment anymore. And so I think like trying to let go and trust God in those areas will really help us have more of that childlike joy again. And it says in the word, like multiple different places, God talking about not living in the future, or not like living in the past, and not talking about how the past was better than the future, or the current time. And then like at the same time, not worrying about it. So that's just one way I feel like we can really fight against that feeling of just being on like the hamster wheel of adulthood and kind of burning out.
I feel like that happens to me. I'll actually notice that my energy gets kind of low.
Yeah.
And I'll think to myself like, I'm kind of just getting into survival mode, like what we talked about. And I'm not really letting myself enjoy my day. So I'll try to have like specific things I do in the day, if I can, to that just bring me enjoyment, you know, like maybe when I cook dinner, I make sure that I listen to a podcast that I really like, right? Yeah. Or I'll take a bath, right? Or I'll spend some time in the evening making sure I read one of my books for fun. Another thing that like you made me think of is right along that line is living here in Colorado. Unless you're like hardcore snowboarder or something, the winter is just not the greatest. And it's so long, and it can be fun through the Christmas season, but then it's like, you know, it's May right now, and the high was like 54 today. You know, it's kind of a cold front, but still we've had snow on Memorial Day.
Yeah, we had snow like just 30 minutes from us yesterday.
It's crazy. It's crazy living here. We don't have spring.
Yeah.
Summer is amazing. Fall is great, but short. And winter can be beautiful, but it lasts forever. And so I find that I can kind of get like, I wouldn't say depressed, but it can be harder to kind of enjoy my days, especially when it's dark and it's cold.
Yeah.
And so I try to find ways, kind of like what you're saying, in the moment. So like right now I'm really looking forward to summer, and I'm so excited about summer that it can be hard for me to enjoy the moment now, but I'll try to find ways to enjoy it. Like even today it was rainy and drizzly, so I'm like, what kind of book can I read that brings out that kind of weather that I love? Or you know, when it's cold, there's but everything for me comes down to books. So I'm like, I'll literally have a list on my phone of like, okay, these are books I want to read in the winter. These are books I want to read in November. These are books
wow.
Yeah, based on theming and stuff. And
my goodness.
And so anyway, just like finding things like that, certain recipes. I have my tried and true recipes, but there are recipes I like to make only in certain weather and certain times of year to kind of bring the joy of that season out. And so I think it's good to kind of find little ways to enjoy whatever season you're in, even if it's not your favorite, even if you're waiting for the next one to come. Find ways to kind of enjoy it, because there is joy to be found in the moment. And like you said, your life is being lived in the moment.
Yeah.
It's being lived right now. And if you're always just waiting to have joy till you get what you think you want, your life is going to pass you by.
Yeah, it's so true. And it's like I said, I think a lot of the reason that we can't live in the moment is because we're just so worried about what's going to come. And I feel like one way to kind of fight that is, like, I thought of this illustration, and it's like when a kid's young and they're starting to learn how to ride a bike. When you're getting on the bike, it's like you have the training wheels, and then you have to take those off, and then your parent has to leave, and you have to become more independent, right? Like, that's how we grow. We have to become more independent in a lot of ways as we grow up. And I think sometimes we make that to be the same as our relationship with Jesus. It's like when we are, when we're a child, we're kind of just trusting, like that childlike faith. We're either trusting our parents are going to take care of us, or, if we know Jesus at that point, it's like, God's going to take care of me. You think about it like that. But when we become a Christian, I think we start at a good place. It's like, I'm very dependent on God. But in our walk with God, we start to feel like, okay, he expects me to become more independent now with him. And I think that's why a lot of the trust goes away. It's like, okay, I need to take more care of this. Like, I need to be more righteous. I need to perform better, because I've been growing up in my relationship with Jesus like that. He's expecting me to take those training wheels off now, right? But he wants us to become more dependent on him, not less, So it kind of just makes me think about, like, realizing that Jesus isn't wanting you to become more independent in your life just because you've known him longer. And then another way I feel like we can just become, like, we can just, allow that part of us to live on, that childlike part of us, is allowing ourselves to keep dreaming. I think, like, as a kid, there's all these things that we want to do, and we feel like we have a lot of time, so we give ourselves the freedom to dream. It's like, oh, well, I want to be president. I want to be a ballerina. I want to do all these things. And it's like, we feel like we have our whole life ahead of us. But then when we get older, it's like, okay, what's reasonable now? I'm running out of time. Like, what can I see? What can actually happen? Like, what connections am I making? And so we kind of limit our dreams to what the reality is in our life right now. And I think that kind of just takes away from, like, us being able to just dream like a child would. So just having the freedom to realize, like, even if you've grown up, there's so much possibility that God can still have for you that you might not be able to see right in front of you.
Absolutely. Yeah. That is so good. And I think, like you said, that's another tactic of the enemy, is he doesn't attack what he's not threatened by, right? And so he sees the potential on your life. Yeah. And one way he can get you to stop is to convince you, like you said, that no, those dreams, those were childish, right? Like, you don't need to be that way. You need to be responsible. And yes, we need to be responsible, but we also need to dream and trust God. And like you said, it's supposed to get ever increasing in how much we trust him.
Exactly.
And I love that picture so much. So, so dream big and don't stop dreaming.
Don't stop believing.
Don't stop believing.
I almost felt like I was going to sing it. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to sing it.
That'll be next episode.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode. If you enjoyed it, then be sure and subscribe to this podcast so that you can catch all of our future episodes coming your way.
And make sure to check us out on Instagram and Facebook. And until next week, remember
to have courage
and be kind.